A very good morning and welcome to Media Monitor, the show that monitors and evaluates media coverage of leading stories of the week and puts the media in the spotlight. I'm your host, Alicia Jali. We are live right here on the SABC News Channel 404 for all local and all global news. In our lineup today, we start by discussing today's newspaper headlines as well as the coverage of the ongoing Gaza conflict, the Ebola outbreak in the African continent. We look at the Numsa and Neasa wage agreement dispute, the altercation between Judge Farlam and miners representative Advocate Dali Mpofu, and in the Marikana Commission, and of course the various protests by students around the country, as well as the Radovan, Krejcir and Louca stolen files. Now, to analyze media coverage of these stories, let's welcome Tarquin Noti, a media studies student at Boston Media House, Dr. Yilva Rodney Gumede, head of journalism, film and television at the University of Johannesburg. And to unpack the Gaza-Israel conflict, we are very pleased to have Aisha Soni, Vice President at Media Review Network. And on the line, we are joined by Mr. Ralph Mateja, media and political analyst. And later, we will be joined by Tamana Makari, who's a journalism lecturer at TUT. Remember, you can call us to give us insight on the stories that you think deserve to be covered by the media. But of course, we're omitted on the following numbers: +2711 714 6847, 714 6843, and 714 6857. You can share your views and comments on Twitter at SA Media Monitor, and of course, like our Facebook page, Media Monitor. Very good morning to you. All right, now, before we go into our discussion with the stories that made headlines throughout the week, let's take a look at today's newspaper headline. Panel, a very good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Good morning, thanks for having us.
Let's start with you, Tarquin. What is your pick on today's newspaper headlines?
Well, I'd like to talk about, in the Sunday Times, I saw this radical matric reform on the cards, and I really enjoy the idea that they're actually going to bring the pass rate up, because I feel like we've got a little bit too much leeway on the actual pass rate. I like the idea that it's actually going to challenge our politicians with they keep talking about how their matric pass rates keep going up, and well, not the pass rates, the amount of matrics that pass, the amount is going up, and now it's going to challenge them a little more, because they're no longer bringing the matric pass rate down. So that's one good thing. But my problem I have with it is they've said something about an exit certificate for grade 9. Which I don't think is that good of an idea, because it's going to encourage people to drop out before they get their matric, and I don't like that idea.
Tarquin, how do you see the media covering this story as a follow-up?
Well, actually, I've seen it quite well across newspapers. Also on news, I've seen little snippets of it, which is, I like the idea that they've been following it so far. Making noise about it, yeah, very much so.
A very important issue as well. Doctor, what do you think?
Well, I think this is an important issue. I would disagree with some of the things, though, and I think that, pass rates are a construct. They could be anything, you know. So we also have to look at what we put into passing a matric. What is the quality assurance that we want for a matric pass, rather than pass rates as such? I think that's the important thing to say.
We're waiting for media to actually unpack that. Aisha, what is your headline story? And of course, the Gaza issue. Tell us what you think about today's newspaper headlines.
Okay, well, I think it's very important that the Gaza issue is getting a lot of news coverage. It has been going on, and it is a problem in the Middle East for a very long time. And now with the advancement in social media network, with the mobilization of masses and people getting to see real-time news updates from Gaza, we are seeing a lot of media awakening, and that's a really good thing.
Thank you so much, panel, for your views on today's newspaper headlines. Now, in our top story today, ceasefires have been made numerous times but crumble in the war-torn Gaza, and the death toll has now escalated to an estimated 1,500. Let's hear what UN spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric and the U.S. Secretary of State, Mr. John Kerry, had to say about the ongoing conflict.
This humanitarian ceasefire will commence at 8 a.m. local time on Friday, August 1st, 2014. It will last for a period of 72 hours unless extended. During this time, the forces on the ground will remain in place. We urge all parties to act with restraint until this humanitarian ceasefire begins, and to fully abide by their commitments during the ceasefire.
Parties have, all the people involved in this have strong demands and strong visions about what the future should look like. Israel has to be able to live in peace and security without terror attacks, without rockets, without tunnels, without sirens going off in the day, and Palestinians need to be able to live with the opportunity to educate their children and move freely and share in the rest of the world and to lead a life that is different from the one they have long suffered. So we hope that this moment of opportunity will be grabbed by the parties, but no one can force them to do that, obviously.
All right, you can call us and, of course, share your views on our top story. Now, Aisha, if you can just explain in basic to us what this war between Gaza and Israel is all about.
Sure. I think I can go back to what Secretary John Kerry was talking about, because he likes to refer to Hamas rockets and Israel has to defend its borders. And this is the stance that's been taken by mainstream media, that this entire conflict is about Israel defending its borders. But I'd like to debunk that, and it is a myth, and I can classify that with facts. But what this is fundamentally about is that the occupation of Palestinian land has been going on for 66 years. In 1948, when Israel was established, Palestinians were kicked off their land, and since then, systematically, Palestinians have been subjugated to occupation from the Israeli regime, the Israeli Zionist regime. They've been colonizing their land continuously, and so that is what the problem today is about. If you look at mainstream media and what the main issues regarding why this conflict started 26 days ago, there are three things that are said. It's Hamas rockets, number one. Israel has a right to defend itself, number two. And that Hamas constantly breaks their ceasefires and uses human shields. I can go through all three of those and we can talk about them. Number one, let's look at Hamas rockets. So everyone goes into the history. Okay, the occupation has been going on for 66 years. We don't have to go into history. Let's start back to 2012. That was when the last time that Israel invaded Gaza and there was a ceasefire put into place. This happened on the 21st of November, 2012. 2 days later, and this was reported by NBC News, on the 23rd of November 2012, Israel reportedly killed a Palestinian man who was 20 years old and 10 of his friends while he tried to access his land. The ceasefire was broken within 2 days, not by Hamas, but by Israel. And within a year, Israel had broken the ceasefire 287 times, not taking into account, now I don't want to use Hamas said this, Israel said this, you can get into the logistics of that, but let's look at relevant sources. Ben White, he is a journalist, compiled his resources from the United Nations, the Palestinian Center of Human Rights, and various Palestinian and Israeli media sources. Within 3 months, from November to February 2013, Israel had killed 4 Gazans, had injured 91, they had 63 shooting attacks, 13 ground invasions, and 30 times they had attacked the fishermen in Gaza. Now, fortunately, I went to Gaza last year, and I can testament this is how they live. They have been under siege, and they are attacked constantly. While we were there, we would hear bombs running over us. We were living near the coast, and we would see Israel firing at the fishermen. And so within that time, let me clarify, Hamas didn't launch any rockets at Israel, and they only launched 2 mortars. In response, what would they do? 4 Gazans had been killed.
Very interesting, Aisha. Now, panel, do you think that our local media has given us so much detail as we're hearing from our expert here, or are we hiding behind that no access to information shield? Doctor?
I mean, I think it's important to point out, and Aisha also alludes to that what we see in this conflict is also the fact that Palestinians have absolutely no access to media. And whereas Israel sits on a huge spin machine and access to both international media and internal media in the region. So I think that there's a power balance just for this, from a media perspective, from coverage perspectives as well. That's very, very important. And I think if there's one thing when you speak to Palestinians, is this idea that we have absolutely no way of telling our own stories. We can't get it out. And it is, as we know, a people trapped in a very, 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 very small geographical area without no recourse. I think that also plays a role for how the story is covered. But I do think that Aisha points out important facts. And
very
that
important
this
facts.
idea that actually the history of the conflict is rarely covered. And this is something that is so fraught with internal, how people perceive the conflict and so forth.
It's a very
I think that the media really has to be very careful in how they cover it.
Well, I feel like we're very sheltered in this whole issue. We only getting fed certain bits and pieces of the actual story. And Aisha's brought up a lot of good points that actually didn't really occur to me until now. And I have a friend that's just come back from Israel he's brought up his own points. And, it's very interesting to see that the two not opposing, but, two sides of the story. And, I feel like we need to get a lot more coverage out so that we can actually understand what's going on properly, so that we don't have
mixed information as well.
Yes.
Let's hear from Ralph Matega. Ralph, what is your view in terms of media coverage of this very sensitive issue between Israel and Gaza?
Well, the media coverage on this, it seems to be quite superficial. It's not so deep, particularly if you look at South Africa's media coverage. Once in a while, you come across an opinion article in a newspaper going deeper, as Aisha is saying, trying to talk about what actually caused this. And there isn't much attempt to try to also place this within the geopolitical situation there. We should take into consideration that one of the reasons why Israel continues with the campaign in Gaza unhindered without even respecting the ceasefire is simply because the United States cannot do anything about it or does not want to do anything about it. We know that the U.S. is the biggest funder of Israel military exchange and just propping up the state of Israel. That is a well-known fact. And Mr. Kerry went there. He failed in trying to get Israel to respect ceasefire. And I do not think any country can actually push Israel towards respecting the ceasefire without the United States, because the Israeli Defense Force relies a lot on the United States military might. So I think that needs to be emphasized as well. You look at countries such as Turkey, they've been trying, of course, to try to push Israel towards respecting ceasefire, but Israel has got no respect for Turkey as well. And we need to also understand the state of Israel, how it works. They look around how global affairs are. They know that the Americans are also spread in Afghanistan. They've just come out of Iraq in their failed Middle East campaign. They know what is going on. They're taking a stock on what is going on in Ukraine. They are aware that in a moment such as this, while the global media can focus on the abhorrence of this campaign, they know that powerful Western countries are looking elsewhere, so their voice is not strong, and Israel goes on doing that. We need to see this kind of perspective coming out. This is not just about, of course, the reports are showing us the images of people being killed, but we need to get deeper so that we can put the blame where it belongs as to exactly why is Israel not moving? Why are they saying they will continue with these campaigns until there is no single tunnel there? We don't even know how many tunnels exist. They're having a blank check to go on this aggression, particularly is because the United States cannot do anything about it. And you pointed out, Aisha pointed
his
out
restaurant and stuff, India. Has inherited the family restaurant.
of Israel is very sophisticated.
Watching Morning Live, thank you for choosing to stay with us now. If you love top,
in the United States, look at how other international networks within the United States.
What does it mean to you personally to be part of the to take part? Humanity in my own way. I'm always performing opportunities that we had. Coming from good own work. I'm always performing on only. But here at home.
Thank you, Ralph.
So you're both incorrect a bit about as a woman, about my mother. I realized it was all like she kept out of me. Myself also the ballet point where to talk about the
said
as well that
this
an artist of killing ways and I could kind of talk through as an instrument. So we had to kind of combine those two together. Of course, sometimes there'll be conflict, but then at the end, we both wanted to say something that can actually come with a nomination and performance,
back and forth. But let's look at the track record. Why did Israel launch this attack on Gaza? They had said that 3 Israeli teens had been kidnapped by Hamas in the West Bank. Max Blumenthal actually refuted this within a week and said that no, the Israeli government, Shin Bet, knew about it. They had put a gag order on national media regarding that, and that they knew that it wasn't Hamas. Hamas also denied any involvement. This was confirmed a month later by the Israeli police spokesperson, Mickey Rosenfeld. So Israel lied about the entire objective of going into Gaza. Now when we look at the ceasefire, again they say Hamas broke the ceasefire. That is not true. From their Twitter account, Hamas
and this is the reports that we're getting. It's also not factual.
Exactly.
there, Aisha?
So I have a problem with Secretary John Kerry as well going on about it, because he is just further aggravating the violence in the region. Hamas, there were heavy clashes the night before the ceasefire was put into place in Rafah, and the Israeli invasion had gone into Gaza 2,400 meters. They had killed 16 Palestinians, and just before the ceasefire was put into place at 8 o'clock, they encountered the Al-Qassam brigades, which is the armed wing of Hamas, and the Israeli soldiers. It is then at 7 o'clock, when the Twitter account reported it, that the soldier was kidnapped, and not before then. So it must be, the Hamas also let the UN know before the ceasefire was gone in that we have an Israeli soldier.
Aisha,
this happened before.
I just want to know, why are we not getting all this information in the mainstream media?
I think it is a problem. There is a lot of pro-Israeli bias. However, I must say that with this massacre, there has been a Twitter revolution. We are getting tweets out from people who live in Gaza, from the doctors who are there, who are taking personal accounts, from the journalists who have seen 4 Bakr children playing on the beach and slaughtered by Israel. And so I think that's how many of us, and that's why this time it is different, that we are seeing mass mobilization, because people on Twitter can make up their own minds. And so we are seeing people making up their own minds that what Israel is doing is right. And let me take a step back from mainstream media. Maybe what I'm being fed isn't actually what is going on, because we have Dr. Mats Gilbert, a Norwegian doctor in Al-Shifa Hospital, telling me that a humanitarian crisis is happening in Gaza, that 378 children have been massacred in Gaza, and that Hamas is not to be blamed. And so I think that it is a revolution in terms of that media revolution, and I think it is time for the mainstream media to step up to it as well.
Absolutely. When is mainstream media going to step up to it, Doctor? When it's too late?
Well, I think that the story is there now, and I think it's, as Aisha says, there's a lot of information coming out via social media right now. And of course, with the humanitarian crisis, there are people present in areas afflicted and working at hospitals, as you say, and UN personnel that has come in as well. However, it's still very, very difficult to get access. And I think this impacts on the coverage as well. I just want to say a quick point on the ceasefire.
Very quickly,
and I
Doctor.
think that ceasefires needs to be monitored, and I think this is also very important to point out.
Thank you so much. All right. And Aisha, thank you so much for your time and expertise on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, before we take a break, let me thank our expert guest once again, Aisha Soni, who's the Vice President at Media Review Network, informing us about the Israel-Gaza conflict. When we return, we discuss the Ebola outbreak that has spread uncontrollably in West Africa. Join the conversation by calling us on +2711 714 6843, 714 6847, and 714 6857, and let us know which stories anywhere you are you feel were not adequately covered by the media. You can share your views and comments on Twitter as well at SA Media Monitor, and like our Facebook page, Media Monitor. We'd also like to thank Mr. Ralph Mateja, who's on the line, who wanted to wish us a very happy birthday. Thank you so much, Ralph. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be back after this. Welcome back. You can also be part of the discussion by calling us and tweeting us. You can ask your questions too via our Twitter account at SA Media Monitor, and our panel can hopefully give you some answers. Now, in our next story, the head of the World Health Organization and leaders of the West African nations affected by the Ebola outbreak are to announce a new $100 million response plan. That's over 1 billion rand. They are meeting in Guinea to launch the initiative to tackle a virus which has claimed 729 lives. Let's take a quick look at this insert compiled by one of our producers, Sibusisi Wetong.
Ebola has struck again, with deaths rising over 1,000 in 3 countries, namely Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea. The South African National Department of Health is screening people at airports and all border posts to ensure that the deadly virus does not reach its shores. If found, these people will be quarantined.
South African authorities heightened their alertness in terms of port health officials being on high alert to detect and respond to any suspected case that may arrive in the country. In addition, we have outbreak response teams in all our provinces. They have been trained and they are ready to respond. Our healthcare workers, both public and private, are also ready to respond to any case that may arrive in the country.
Head of Zoonotic Diseases from the National Department of Health, Wayne Ramkrishna, also said that South Africans should not panic.
It's very good that South African people know what's going on in West Africa, but there's no need to panic.
West African leaders agreed to take stronger measures to try to bring the West outbreak of Ebola under control and prevent it from spreading outside its regions.
All right, let's now welcome Mr. Tamani Makadi, who's a lecturer at TUT. And still staying with us is, of course, Dr. Gumede as well as Takwet. Now, panel, are we doing enough in terms of providing extensive coverage on the Ebola story? Or are we just saying, well, it hasn't happened in our country, so we won't be bothered? Let's start with you, Takwet.
I definitely feel like there's not enough coverage on the Ebola story. You can hardly find it in the newspapers. You have to scroll through the newspapers to actually find anything about it. Although I do feel like the world has jumped towards it in order to try to start sorting it out. I feel like we haven't covered enough in the media, but we have done enough to try and keep it quarantined to an extent. The Department of Health have said that South Africans need not panic in terms of Ebola coming through, because they have a good contingency plan as well as a good detection program in place. So I feel like we as South Africans are safe for now, but I also feel like that we do need to have a lot more media coverage so we can see what's happening with the virus.
But shouldn't media be probing what those contingency plans are so that if something goes wrong, somebody's held accountable? Tamani?
No, absolutely. I fully agree. These are the issues that needs to be raised and asked properly. Obviously, it's a bit tricky because some of these people carrying the disease, as I listened to one of the specialists last week, they're saying if it's still at a very early stage, it may not be detected. But what happens if one of us here, you travel anywhere in the continent, you come back.
We have international airports, meaning that we have an influx of visitors from all over the world. And I think media is not really driving that point home. Why are we so relaxed?
Absolutely. The question has to be asked to say, what are those contingency plans? I mean, what is it that is going to be done? How so? Of course, it's a deadly disease. I mean, if you're talking just over 700 people, in Liberia alone, I mean, it's tragic.
Doctor?
Well, I think we need to also factor in that there's a balance to be struck for the news media here in terms of how much coverage do you give to a story where you can end up creating panic, to be honest. So I think that I take the points that have been reiterated here by my colleagues, that of course the story should be covered, it merits coverage. How we cover it is of course of utmost importance. We have to be very factual. Probing, as you say, what the contingency plans are, but you don't want to end up creating a panic as the news media. And I think there is a fine balance here. And I do think that our news media has covered a story fairly well. But
would you rather not panic than be safe, Doctor, and have all the information that you need to take, necessary measures in case you find yourself in that situation?
Air travel is a contentious point here, as we pointed out. Of course, Ebola can can travel quite quickly, and particularly in areas with very porous borders. We don't have that porous border as such. We do have influx of people coming through our borders that we can't monitor as well.
Yes.
But I mean, that said, this is the largest outbreak ever of Ebola, and that's what the World Health Organization has pointed out. So
now, panel, in terms of creating awareness, do people even understand how contagious this deadly virus is, and is the media doing enough to inform the public?
Well, I'd actually wanted to say something about that. There was one of the American doctors that was working in the area, the infected area, has now been returned to America for medical treatment, and I thought that was a good move in terms of, yes, better medical treatment, but at the same time, is it really a smart idea to now knowingly take the Ebola virus and put it in America? Because if he could get infected by helping patients, what's going to happen to his doctors? And, you know, it's like there's a game on a smartphone. You see a little red aeroplane fly across from the country and infect the next country. And it's you know, that's the exact image that I got in my mind when I heard about that doctor going across. And I don't think we're having enough information of how deadly and dangerous this disease really is.
And nobody wanted to question, what about the illegal immigrants that actually enter the country? What measures are put in place there? Well, we're going to leave it there for now. And when we return, we're going to look at the media coverage of the ending of the Numsa wage strike, as well as the Marikana Commission. You can still be part of our discussion by expressing your views as to which stories you think should have been covered by the media by calling us on +2711 714 6843, 714 6847, 714 6857. Share your views and comments on Twitter as well at SA Media Monitor, as well as on Facebook. Stay with us. This is Media Monitor.
Can South Africans survive 2014? Many of us actually were given bursaries by state-owned enterprises, but the state shrunk, telecom was privatized, and now you are sitting with huge unemployed people, but huge backlogs in terms of infrastructure that could develop the same young people.
It's in our hands, and our future is up to us. It's a tough year, and tough decisions will have to be made by the government. It's an election year, which makes it difficult to make tough decisions. I mean, it's tough to make tough decisions. It's especially tough in an election year.
That's Rights and Recourse, Sundays 2 p.m. on SABC News.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor, and you can still be part of our discussion by calling us on the numbers that will appear at the bottom of your screens, as well as on Twitter and on Facebook. There, the numbers are in our next story. The National Employers Association of South Africa, NEASA, is extremely dissatisfied with the settlement that SAISFA, Numsa and 5 other unions entered into to bring a partial end to the metal industry strike. Panel, again, what went on here? We are too confused. We missed the facts. What happened with the coverage of the story? Tamani.
Look, I think it's a dicey one, because you have people who are supposed to be working together, but obviously the differences that are there, you can just understand that some are happy, some are not happy. The double digit they are already talking about. Is it sustainable? But of course, one will also understand the fact that if the price of bread goes up, it affects everybody. So, yes, answering your question, have we covered this enough? I think the media so far, they've tried their best in terms of covering this story, but it's the issues that affects the people which I think they need to be, you sort of be unpacked.
Highlighted.
Absolutely.
Doctor?
Yeah.
No, but risk of sounding repetitive, because we've talked about wage strikes before on the show, that this is exactly it. And I think that here the media absolutely has a role to play to cover the issues on the ground and make it very, very clear to the readership what has been going on. And it's not only the negotiations as such, it is actually about the issues that affect people on the ground.
And we haven't seen much of that. People's stories there, Tarquin.
Well, there has been quite a bit of it on your YouTubes and social medias. I've been following quite closely on YouTube and that the strikes.
But how many people have access to that, Tarquin?
That's very true. Exactly. That is very true. That is the issue. We need to get it out more in media, very
mainstream,
much so, because that's where people are looking for the news. And that we shouldn't be looking towards social media and YouTubes and things like that for our news. We should be able to look at our media coverage and actually be able to see it in the newspaper or on TV or wherever mainstream media is. I feel like we haven't covered it enough.
Now, before we even get emotional, did media explain who SABC is? And because now everyone is confused as to where exactly do they fit in all this puzzle. And already some members are going back to work and now they are locking people out. What happened to the agreement? What is really going on here? Someone.
What happened to the agreement? A good question, but the one thing that I also wanted to point out here is that if you talk about nurses, and I'm using that as an example, you have these people who are, and I don't want to say subjected, but they attend to so many of our people, especially if you're talking about public hospitals. Now, of course, we're talking the 10%. On the other hand, these guys are saying we can only afford 7%. But I'm really concerned about the state of our health facilities. The people who are, again, let me use that word, subjected to these conditions. And one somehow will sort of understand them if they go to, I mean, with the pace in which they've been going,
But now, Neasa continues to lock out striking workers. Has the media explained the workers' rights in these situations, Doctor?
I mean, it's something that should be said as well, and that is that, you know, labour reporting suffers, I think. And we don't see the labour report beat getting, you know, funds anymore, and it's taken over much more by the political beat in terms of journalism. So I do think that there are severe lacks here, and to explain rights is probably should be a straightforward thing for the media to do, actually.
Tarquin?
On the flip side, I'd like to point out that, yes, we should be pointing out their rights and explaining their rights, but at the same time, they should uphold the law. The violent protests that have been going on, where people are actually breaking into the workshops and that and breaking down the equipment, I don't believe that's the right way to go about it. I believe that we need to, if we're going to protest, I'm all for the striking, but to the extent of where it's still lawful striking and it doesn't put other people's lives into harm. And in the sense of if you're breaking down the machinery, how are you going to expect the employers to pay you when they have to now pay off millions of rands of machinery? They don't have the money after you've broken down all the machinery.
Media never, ever looks at that side of the story, Tarquin, and that's where we leave it, unfortunately, on that topic. Now, in our next story, an altercation transpired this week at the Farlam Commission of Inquiry between Advocate Dali Mpofu and the Commission Chairman, Judge Ian Farlam. Let's take a look at this clip.
The point I want to make is that London, like SABC, was involved in...
I have to say, you're not questioning what SABC do.
I've told them about the collision between the two.
But whether, I know there will be a contention that SABC endeavoured to mislead us in certain respects. Whether they succeeded will be another matter. But whether that's correct or not, is a matter, it's not presently understood. You argue it later, there's another cross-examination which your argument will be based. But you don't have to converse with this. You don't have to make some statements as you go along, which picked up by the media, you know, that the police will give you.
No, Chairperson, I think that's grossly unfair. That's a grossly unfair accusation you're making against me, and I would like it to be withdrawn. I've just... Okay, well, then, Chairperson, I'll take it up, you know, at a higher level.
Concentrate on the issue.
No, well, you are the one who's raising the temperature, Chairperson. How can you say that? How can you say that? How can you say that? How can you, when I'm questioning a witness, want to involve issues about the media? This is not a game, Chairperson.
No, I'm fully aware of that.
Yeah. This is not a game or a show or a television show. People died here.
I'm aware of that too.
Very interesting indeed. Now, a panel, Dali Mpofu just the other day said this commission was just a public relations exercise. And I don't think media has even followed up on that. And then we get these kind of outbursts in the commission. But media is still not further probing that. Tarquin, what do you think?
I'm very frustrated with this whole issue due to the fact that no one is really taking any responsibility. Everyone's trying to go, well, I was reading in the news that one of the people on trial was saying when he was asked if he drove a certain member around, and he said, I don't know, I could have taken him around the compound, or I could have taken him to the stop street. I don't know, I drove a lot of people around. They're very much trying to just take a blasé, evasive stance on everything, and it's frustrating that no one really wants to just take a bit of responsibility.
Now, panel, there was an interesting review on commissions and their success rate this week in the papers. We asked a week before if these commissions serve their purpose. Again, your views about the Marikana Commission of Inquiry. What do you feel, Doctor?
No, I mean, of course they serve a purpose, and the Marikana Commission is set up to investigate not only what happened during the massacre up at the Lonmin mine, but the aftermath as well as such. And I think that what happened, what we saw from court, and the spat between Judge Ian Farlam and Dali Mpofu here, is Advocate Dali Mpofu, is something that we got an insight into court. We've gotten used to these kind of things through the Oscar Pistorius trial, I think. So all of a sudden we're highly critical to what goes on in court as well. But of course, this is out of line. It shouldn't happen. You don't think that this is something that sort of befits the process.
All right, let's take Silo, our first caller on the line. Silo, very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. Your comment, please.
Thanks for taking my call. I'm so worried the way the commission has been handled, especially between the witnesses and the chairman, Dali Mpofu, and so forth. And I wonder, are we going to get the truth, or it is the ego that's really playing here at the commission? Because I really don't think as the public really getting what is important in this commission. It is about who has the power, who has the arrogance to ask questions and to answer. And I feel we've been robbed by this, not to be put on the TV like what they did on Oscar. We only get the clips. And that are not enough for us as our viewers and listeners to really follow Marikana like we did on Oscar. The media is not taking us seriously also on this one, on Marikana Commission. And that's a very point of mine.
Thank you so much, Silo from Limpopo, and he makes a very, very valid point, and of which media hasn't really probed into that. Very quickly, Tamani, very quickly.
No, I think I would rather say it's things like this that actually make ordinary people feel that these kind of commissions, they're not even worthwhile.
And we're hearing it from people. So now, media, please start going out and getting us all the information, the juicy stuff that we need to hear. All right, well, stay tuned, because when we return, we'll be discussing the coverage of the student protests at universities. You can still call us on +2711 714 6847, 714 6843, and 714 6857. Share your views and comments on Twitter at SA Media Monitor, as well as on Facebook. Don't go anywhere.
Accra is a beautiful city of contradictions.
Funerals in Ghana are colorful and flamboyant. Marikana coffins are functional coffins made by specialized carpenters. These colorful objects, which have developed out of figurative palanquins, are not only coffins but considered real works of art. Each year, festivals and durbars are held in various parts of the country to celebrate the heritage of the people.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. You can still be part of our discussion by calling us on the numbers that will appear very shortly at the bottom of your screens. There they are, not forgetting Facebook as well as Twitter. In our next story, Parliament has condemned the various protests by students this week. Panel, what are your views about this story now? Why are we not getting media holding people accountable for these misdemeanors? But I'm sure these grievances are long before violent street protests. Why isn't media probing into these long before they get to that stage where people are protesting? I mean, this thing with NSFAS funds and everything has been an issue for quite some time now. Tamani?
No, I mean, it's been going on for a very long time. And again, if you look at it, it can also be argued to say NSFAS is not university's problem, but a government. So I think universities, on the other hand, of course, they have a role to play. How do they, allocate these funds to students? Who gets what, how much, and what is the criteria?
Hold that thought there. Let me take Andrew quickly from Ulundi. Andrew, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. Your comment, please, sir. Andrew, please turn down your TV set so you can hear us and we can hear you. Are you on the line with us? Yes, Andrew, we can hear you now. Please go ahead.
The thing is, I'm just wondering, actually, as an ordinary person in the Republic of South Africa, as to who actually is making mockery of the law. It seems that the very learned people in our public institutions are the very one who's making mockery of the law. I can mention only two. One is, as you said, regarding the Marikana, the very same Mpofu is the same guy who now, before they go for closing arguments, is saying now, charge Marikana. But they shouldn't have come now while the commission is still on. But he must still continue with the arguments, that will mitigate the circumstances. But again, Miss, the other point is, it is the very same, Tulima Donzala, who's also charged with looking at and making sure that the public institutions look very well into public funds. He's the same guy who's charging this SABC guy, I don't know what his name is.
All right, thank you so much, Andrew from Ulundi, with your comment there. Anything you want to add to that, panel, very quickly? Tamani?
Well, I guess
we spoke about this in terms of the fact that he's saying that it's very sad that very learned and leaders of our society are coming out as if they're making a mockery of our law. That is not good. And if it's coming out from the public, we really need to start investigating things like this, Doctor.
No.
Some decorum needed, maybe, and particularly, and that was, as I pointed out earlier as well. And I mean, it's sad. And if the public feels like this, you lose trust, And I think that's very sad. And I think that our two callers pointed out, that sort of pointed to the same issue.
I mean, he's also been saying that Mr. X's testimony is absolutely false. And I mean, Mr. X has said that he's actually telling the truth. So why can't we give him a chance? All right, but let's get back into the students now. I recently went into a media youth forum and needs to print media. This is what the youth said, rather. The print media needs to innovate with times, but digital is their biggest source because of quick updates. But why did we not get this story everywhere as it affects students? Doctor, let me start with you. You work with students.
Yes, no, absolutely. And we've seen the protests at the campus where I work as well, at University of Johannesburg. I mean, firstly, this is these protests date back to unresolved issues in our transitions to democracy. where people feel that they have a right to education, and rightfully so, I should say. And I think it's very sad that the students have had to take this into their own hands, so that actions have become and strikes have become so violent. And I think if they, it also, comes back to university leadership not listening, government not listening. And I think that as much as we could push this over to government and the NEFSAS funds and so forth, as universities and as lecturers as well, we need to listen to our students and to prevent these kind of strikes as well. I think that's very important.
Before you answer, Tamani, let me quickly take Xolani on the line. Xolani, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us on Media Monitor. Your comment, please.
Yes, good morning, Alicia.
Good morning, Xolani.
And the panel as well.
Please go ahead. Good morning.
I would like to comment on the issue of the lockout, which is doing by the members of the partly sister members and mostly Neasa members. Go ahead, Xolani. Yes? Go ahead. Okay. Firstly, I would like to place in record that the Numsa trade union has approached the negotiations with the integrity and the good faith and honesty and transparency. And without any resort, there were cheap bargaining tactics which were demonstrated by Neasa in the negotiations, which now they go in and go out of the negotiations. While we are fully aware of the state of the industry in the matter of the engineering sector, we must also be very acutely aware of the miserable conditions of the lives of our people, which is the majority is blacks and African working class. Now, what Neasa is doing, the lockout they are doing currently, what is behind that, it's simply racism. Those are the white companies which are doing that to the black working class. Exactly, they are bound by the agreement, which the agreement bind all non-parties.
All right, okay. Thank you so much, Xolani, for your input there. Well, Xolani is basically saying that Neasa is interfering with a rather very open and honest process of negotiations. And panel, unfortunately, we're going to have to take a very quick ad break. And then when we come back, I'm going to read your tweets as well as hear from the panel. All right, we're not going to take an ad break. But panel, let me hear from you. What do you think will be making headlines this week? Let's start with you, Tarquin.
This week, I feel like they're gonna have Israel-Gaza conflicts up again. It is a very big issue, and it does involve most of the world, because they could end up involving a lot of people into this, or else hopefully the Ebola outbreak is going to actually start getting a little more coverage and hopefully make headlines.
Someone?
No, absolutely. Israel-Gaza, it's definitely going to continue to make headlines, more for so because South Africa is also getting involved. And I think from a local angle's point of view, I think it is a story that's going to, take lead in most of our media houses.
Doctor?
Yes, sounding repetitive again, but yes, I agree. And I think that we've seen now the humanitarian crisis on the ground. It's compelling in terms of the pictures and so on. But I do think we're going to see more coverage of the international community and what's being done from our government as well.
Thank you very much to my panel. Let me quickly take some of your tweets if there is some time. Let's see if we can have some tweets on the bright eye. There we go. Let's see who that is. That is... Motlante Sekho says Israel is like the US. They want to conquer states that have resources by means of cheap political agenda that does not exist. Motlante Sekho, thank you for your comment. Gio says on social media, Israel has by and large lost the war. There are simply no arguments that can justify genocidal attacks. Gio, thank you so much. And last but not least, Janet says war is a two-way street with many cul-de-sacs started. Israel retaliated. It's all got out of hand. Thank you so much. Last again but not least, Tato says, ask again, how can they reassure us about something they don't have control over? People come illegally. carried by crocodiles. That's in relation to, of course, the Ebola virus. So thank you so much, panel, for joining us this morning. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. We had so much to cover.
I just wonder how those crocodiles look like.
Well, there you have it. Thank you so much. Our viewers' contributions and suggestions is highly valued. Remember, you can email us your views about the show at mediamonitor@sabc.co.za. You can share your views and comments on Facebook. Go to www.facebook.com/Media Monitor and like our page. You can also follow us on Twitter @SA Media Monitor. Thank you so much for watching Media Monitor. Join us again next week. And in case you missed our live show, remember, you can still catch the repeat on Monday morning at 2 a.m. For myself, Alicia Jali, and the rest of the QTV team and the panel, have yourself a blessed Sunday and a very happy first birthday to the channel. That's SABC News. It's all local, all global, and all the time. Goodbye.